My name is David. I'm 52 years old, and I recently learned that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, but for me, it was the day I decided to bury a bond that had already rotted from the inside. Imagine standing at the altar, the woman you love trembling, not because of wedding nerves, but because the man who grew up with you, your own cousin, is there preparing to destroy her dignity in front of everyone. I looked Ryan straight in the eyes while holding my glass for the toast, and in that moment, I knew there would be no forgiveness. That idiot thought that because we shared blood, I would let him humiliate my fiancée and undermine my choice of best man. He was wrong. My cousin tried to ruin my wedding because I chose my best friend Daniel as my best man. But what he didn't know was that I was already aware of the hell he had secretly put Sophia through behind my back. What you're about to hear isn't a story about family reconciliation. It's the story of how I put a miserable man in his place, permanently. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, hit like and subscribe. Here, we share real stories of revenge and lessons that are never forgotten. Ryan believed our last name was a shield for his cruelty, but that day he learned my patience has limits, and my memory is unforgiving. The humiliation he tried to cause came back to him with a force he never imagined, and today I'm going to tell you exactly how I made him fall. To understand how we reached that point, I need to explain who I was before all this chaos. At 52, I had built a life around order and discipline. I'm a man who values silence and predictability. My logistics business taught me that a small mistake in the chain of command can destroy everything, and that's how I viewed my personal life, as a structure that had to be protected. Sophia came into my life 3 years ago. She's younger than me, calmer than I've ever been, and carries an integrity that made me believe in commitment again. Everything was going according to plan, or so I thought, until my family's shadow began darkening my peace. My cousin Ryan has always been the kind of man who survives on appearances. We grew up together, almost like brothers. My aunt used to say we had to look out for each other, but for decades I was the one looking out for him. I pulled him out of financial disasters, got him jobs he didn't deserve, and tolerated his arrogance with a patience that now feels ridiculous. Ryan always carried that unjustified superiority, that belief the world owed him something simply for existing. He expected to be my best man, not out of love, but for the status it gave him. He wanted the spotlight, the speech, the applause, but I had other plans. My best friend Daniel stood with me in the trenches. When my father died and Ryan was more concerned about the inheritance than the funeral, Daniel was the one sitting with me at 2 in the morning, saying nothing, just being there. Loyalty isn't claimed by last name. It's earned through time and action. So when I chose Daniel as my best man, there was no hesitation. When I told Ryan, he didn't explode. He went cold. He forced a smile and said, "It's your decision, David, but family comes first." I didn't see it then, but that wasn't advice. It was a declaration of war. What I didn't know was how deep his resentment ran. Ryan started showing up wherever Sophia happened to be when I wasn't around. He used wedding planning as an excuse to get close to her. Sophia, naturally kind and respectful of my family, tried to stay polite, but I began noticing changes. She became withdrawn, avoided family gatherings. Her eyes shifted whenever Ryan's name came up. In my rigid, work-focused mindset, juggling contracts, vendors, logistics, I assumed it was wedding stress. I was wrong. Financially, I had always been ahead of Ryan. I owned a large home, had stability and professional respect. He was constantly on the edge of collapse, jumping from one failed venture to another. That imbalance fueled his resentment. For him, choosing Daniel over him wasn't just an insult, it was humiliation, and humiliation breeds revenge. Ryan began spreading quiet rumors, telling relatives that Sophia was manipulating me, that she only wanted my money, that I was abandoning family. Dinners became tense. I maintained composure, believing maturity would rise above drama. I failed to understand something important. Some people don't want to rise to your level. They need to drag you down to feel equal. As the wedding date approached, Ryan grew more erratic. He began sending anonymous messages to Sophia, implying I had other women, questioning the legitimacy of my wealth. She stayed silent to protect me and preserve peace. He intercepted her after work, intimidated her, hinted that if she married me, he would make her life inside the family unbearable. And I remained blind, focused on contracts and seating charts, building a perfect stage for an event my own cousin was poisoning from the inside. I felt powerful, successful, in control. But the foundation of my life had a crack, and Ryan was widening it with every lie whispered behind my back. That was the calm before the storm, the moment I still believed decency was universal. Soon, I would learn that for some people, decency is just a weakness to exploit. Everything broke a week before the ceremony. I came home earlier than usual because the florist had cancelled, and I wanted to work out a backup plan with Sophia. When I walked in, the silence inside the house felt heavy, almost solid. I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't the kind of crying that comes from sadness. It was exhaustion. Fear. Without saying a word, she handed me the phone. What I saw froze my blood. There were voice recordings and messages sent from blocked numbers, but the voice was unmistakable. Ryan. In the audio clips, my cousin was openly threatening her. He told her that if she didn't call off the engagement, he would publish edited photos of her with other men, that he would tell my family she was trash, that he would make sure I hated her. But it wasn't just the threats. It was the tone. Ryan spoke with animal cruelty, enjoying the fear in her silence. In one recording, I could hear him cornering her in a parking garage the day before. The struggle, her breath shaking near the microphone, and his words, "David is mine. This family is mine. You're just an obstacle I'm going to remove." Something inside me shut down. I didn't feel the urge to yell. I didn't want to break anything. I felt cold, a glacial calm running through my spine, the kind of anger that allows terrifying clarity. I took Sophia's hands and asked her to tell me everything. She confessed that Ryan had been physically intimidating her for weeks, that during the last family dinner, while I was out on the balcony smoking, he had pushed her against the hallway wall and warned her that if I didn't replace Daniel with him as best man, our wedding night would turn into a funeral. The humiliation was total. I felt like a fool. A logistics executive who prides himself on control couldn't protect the woman he loved under his own roof. My own cousin, the one who ate at my table, was harassing my fiancée just to wound my pride. This wasn't about the best man anymore. It was an invasion of my private life, a calculated attempt to destroy my happiness from the inside. That same night, Ryan had the nerve to call me. His voice sounded relaxed, casual. He said he'd heard Sophia seemed stressed, and maybe I should reconsider the best man decision to keep peace in the family. He suggested that if he took Daniel's place, he'd personally make sure the cousins stopped criticizing my future wife. It was blackmail, plain and simple. He thought I was cornered, that to avoid scandal and protect Sophia, I'd fold. I listened without interrupting, kept my breathing steady. "I'll think about it, Ryan," I told him. "Let's talk at the rehearsal dinner." I hung up and stood in the dark living room. The symbolic separation had already happened. Ryan wasn't family anymore. He was a parasite that needed to be removed, but I wasn't going to scream. If he wanted a spectacle at my wedding, I would give him a performance he would never forget. 2 days later, my uncles called to pressure me. They said Ryan was hurt, that the family was dividing, that I was wrong to choose a friend over blood. My aunt even hinted that Sophia was causing unnecessary drama. That's when I understood it wasn't just Ryan. It was an entire family structure built on entitlement and envy, the sacred belief that mediocrity deserves priority over merit. I suddenly felt like a stranger among my own blood. The betrayal was complete when I realized some of them were actually enjoying watching my wedding unravel. The greatest loss wasn't the money invested or the dream of the celebration. It was the loss of respect for where I came from. That night I slept on the couch, watching over Sophia while she finally rested. I felt the man I used to be dying quietly, making room for the man who would execute the response. Ryan thought he was bending my arm. In reality, he was giving me every reason I needed to erase him from my life permanently. He believed I feared gossip. At 52, the only thing I fear is disloyalty from the people who claim to stand beside me when the fire gets hot. My plan wasn't born from impulse. It was built on precision. In logistics, if you want to collapse a rotten structure, you don't punch the wall. You remove the foundation while the building still believes it's standing. I didn't confront Ryan. Instead, I called him the next day with a broken tone in my voice, performing a defeat he could taste through the phone. I told him he was right, that family came first, and that I wanted him to have a special role in the wedding. I wouldn't replace Daniel, I said, but I would give him something even more important, the main speech and the honor of presenting a symbolic family gift in front of everyone. Ryan took the bait. His ego is his greatest weakness. He felt victorious, convinced his campaign of intimidation against Sophia had worked, and that I was finally the weak man he always believed me to be. While he prepared his suit and rehearsed his moment of glory, I met with Daniel and an old contact of mine, an investigator who handles internal audits for my company. I didn't just need proof of recent threats. I needed proof of who Ryan really was. The truth surfaced quickly. My investigator uncovered that Ryan wasn't only harassing Sophia, he had been siphoning funds from a small family business my aunt still ran. He was stealing from his own mother to cover gambling debts and hidden addictions. There were bank statements, recordings, testimonies from women he had tried to extort using similar tactics. I now had everything. The weapon was loaded. I just needed the right moment to pull the trigger. Daniel remained my anchor. I asked him to stay officially as my best man, but keep a low profile until the big day. Let him think he won, I told him. Daniel, with the calm only true friends possess, simply nodded. He knew I wasn't looking for a fistfight in an alley. I was aiming for social and moral annihilation. During those days, I protected Sophia like never before. I moved her to a safe location under the excuse of final preparations. I told her to block Ryan's number, deactivate her social media for a week. And trust me, my voice was colder than she'd ever heard it. My patience was absolute. Every time Ryan texted me with smug advice about how to handle my woman, I replied with polite gratitude. Every message I sent him was another shovel of dirt on the grave of his reputation. I hired a professional video team for the reception. I told them I wanted a special family montage to be played right before the main toast. I handed them a USB drive. "Don't open it until the event," I said. "It's a surprise for my family." They didn't ask questions. I also spoke with my attorney. I didn't just want Ryan out of my wedding. I wanted him out of my life, legally. I prepared documentation severing any remaining business ties and a restraining order to be served immediately after the reception. My revenge wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be administrative, surgical. I wanted him to realize what had happened only after every exit door had already been locked. The night before the wedding, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at the suit hanging in my room. I felt an unexpected calm. No nerves. I had analyzed every variable, every potential reaction from my family, every possible disruption. Ryan believed he would step onto that stage as the hero, the man who put the foreign bride and the outsider friend in their place. He had no idea I had turned my own wedding into a courtroom where he would be the only defendant. Intelligence is knowing how to wait. Most men would have exploded and punched him in the street, ruining the wedding and possibly their own lives. Not me. I wanted him to suffer where it hurt most, in front of the very people he tried to manipulate. Patience is a muscle I've trained for 52 years, and that night it was at its strongest. Everything was ready. The guests, the food, the music, and the trap. The day arrived. The venue was flawless, filled with white flowers and an air of elegance Ryan believed he had conquered. During the ceremony, I could feel him behind me, breathing with that arrogant confidence of someone who thinks he owns the moment. Daniel stood beside me, steady and unreadable. Sophia looked radiant, though I felt the slight tremor in her hand. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know how deep the cut would go. At the reception, Ryan moved from table to table like he was the host, shaking hands with my business partners, joking with my uncles, throwing subtle looks of contempt toward Daniel. When it was time for the speeches, He stood before anyone else, straightened his tie, and walked to the center of the room with a predator's smile. 300 guests turned their attention to him. I remained seated, legs crossed, watching him with absolute calm. The fruit of patience is best served cold. First of all, he began dramatically, I want to thank my cousin David for remembering that blood always comes first. His tone was theatrical, calculated. As family, sometimes we have to make hard decisions to protect our own from outside influences. He meant Sophia and Daniel. There was an uneasy murmur across the ballroom. He believed this was his victory lap. That's when I gave a nearly invisible signal to the tech team. The lights dimmed. Ryan paused, confused, microphone still in hand. I've prepared something special for this toast, I said clearly without standing. A reminder of who my real family truly is. The massive screen behind him lit up. No childhood photos, no sentimental memories. The first thing that echoed through the high-end speakers was his own voice. The recording of him threatening Sophia, promising to destroy her dignity if she didn't cancel the wedding. The audio was crystal clear, brutal, impossible to deny. The room fell into a suffocating silence as his cruel words filled every corner of the hall. Ryan's face drained of color in seconds. He tried to speak, but the screen changed again. Bank statements, audit documents, evidence of him stealing from his own mother, gambling debts, text messages outlining his plan to extort me so he wouldn't ruin the event. It wasn't dramatic editing. It was structured evidence, presented like a corporate damage report. I looked at my aunt sitting in the front row. The horror on her face as she realized her favorite son had been draining her business was the first installment of repayment. Ryan dropped the microphone. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot. He tried to approach me, stammering that it was a setup, that everything was manipulated. I stood slowly, not a bead of sweat on my forehead. "Get out," I said, not loudly, but in a voice that cut through the air like steel. "The family you defend so passionately just saw who you are. You have no cousin, you have no protection, and starting tomorrow, you'll be facing criminal charges for extortion and theft." 2 security guards I had personally instructed stepped forward and took him by the arms. Ryan began struggling, shouting insults, losing every ounce of composure he had tried so hard to fake. They dragged him down the center aisle, past the business partners he wanted to impress and the relatives he had manipulated. It was a pathetic exit, fitting for a small man. I turned back to the guests. Sophia was crying, but this time from relief. Daniel placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I lifted my glass and looked at the remaining faces, those who had doubted me, those who had stayed silent. I didn't need a speech. The truth had already crushed the snake in its own arena. The music resumed, but the atmosphere had changed permanently. Justice isn't joyful, it's necessary. And watching Ryan disappear through those doors, alone, exposed and finished, was the greatest wedding gift I could have given myself. After security dragged Ryan out of the ballroom, the silence that followed wasn't discomfort. It was truth finally exposed. Several of my relatives lowered their heads. My aunt left shortly after, unable to meet anyone's eyes. There was no reconciliation that night, and there never will be. I have no interest in forgiveness from people who stayed silent while a coward with my last name harassed the woman I love. The wedding continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Sophia and I danced, and for the first time in months I felt her body relax in my arms. The parasite had been removed. Daniel remained by my side, proving that loyalty doesn't require contracts or shared DNA. Ryan tried calling me the next day, and the next. His tone shifted from pleading to threatening, as it always does with men like him. I blocked every attempt and let my attorney handle the rest. Today, he's facing legal consequences that will strip him of what little he had left. His name is now synonymous with disgrace in our circle. I've learned that family can either be the safest refuge or the most dangerous nest of snakes. At 52, I have no room in my life for mediocrity disguised as affection. Some criticized the cold precision of what I did, saying it wasn't the time or place. I tell them there is no better place to unmask a traitor than in front of the very audience he tried to manipulate. Moral justice isn't always beautiful, but it is final. Sophia and I built our life far from that toxicity. My business continues to grow. My home is now a sanctuary of peace. My circle has narrowed to what truly matters. I feel no remorse for destroying my cousin's reputation. He lit the fuse. I simply allowed him to burn in the fire he created. Blood may pump the heart, but integrity is what keeps a man standing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. If this story felt as intense to you as it did for me to live it, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.